A reporter has 12 hours in which to save the life of a man he knows is innocent. True crime is after the ITV News at 10.
A black day for the euro as France loses its AAA credit rating and several more Eurozone countries are expected to be downgraded. It is a humiliation for President Sarkozy and will damage the French economy. Are the doors closing on his hopes of holding on to the Élysée Palace?
This is the ITV News at 10 with Mary Nightingale and James Mates.
To add to the bad news, talks with banks aimed at saving Greece from bankruptcy have broken down. The Greeks are warning of a catastrophe if there's no deal. Also on the programme, Osborne is rethinking his changes to child benefit to make them fairer. Labour say it's a shambles.
Network Rail are to be prosecuted for the grey rig train crash that killed 1 and injured more than 80.
And the disabled rowers have been forced to stop mid-Atlantic as they wait for emergency supplies.
Good evening. Europe is facing a fresh crisis tonight after France was stripped of its AAA credit rating. Its government confirmed the downgrade this evening. Austria and Italy are among others, expecting to hear that they too have been downgraded. For President Sarkozy, who has long stressed the importance of keeping the top rating, it represents a very personal humiliation just months before the election. For Europe, it was a bad end to a bad day. Earlier talks with the banks to prevent Greece defaulting on its debts collapsed. If there's no deal, one official said tonight, it will be a catastrophe for Greece and for Europe. Our economics editor, Richard Edgar, reports.
France is on the defensive tonight, closing ranks as it suffers the humiliation of a downgrade. Ministers were locked in crisis talks at the Élysée Palace, tackling news that the country's being shut out of the elite AAA club. In a hastily arranged appearance, the finance minister tells French TV he's not concerned at French creditworthiness being cut a notch. It's not a catastrophe, he says. It's an excellent rating. But it's not good news. He would have preferred to keep the AAA rating. Investors would have preferred it too. As rumours of the French downgrade and of other countries began to leak out this afternoon, the euro sank like a stone.
It means basically that it will be much harder for them to raise money in the markets. The cost of borrowing will increase. There are significant implications, of course, for the Eurozone as a whole, because basically it will be much harder and much more expensive to raise funds or underwrite funds that need to be raised for the European support mechanism. And it has therefore implications for being able to support the rest of the Eurozone through the financial difficulties.
That European support mechanism is just one of the bailout funds jeopardised by this downgrade. Leaders across Europe have lots more on their plate, as talks on another bailout of Greece broke down today. There are some crumbs of comfort.
We've got to remember that last year the US lost its AAA credit rating, and the US certainly has been able to carry that off without an awful lot of pressure. So it is an event that perhaps we will be hearing more to do in relation to other countries.
President Nicolas Sarkozy said at the end of last year that the top credit rating was a national treasure. And until today, France had held that AAA longer than any other country. That boast now looks rather limp. Richard Edgar, ITV News.
Well, as Richard said, President Sarkozy has been holding crisis talks with ministers tonight at the Élysée Palace, and our Europe correspondent Martin Geisler is there. Martin, economically this is obviously very serious, but politically what problems does it create for President Sarkozy?
Well, huge, significant problems, James. They've been in crisis talks for much of the day, and little wonder. This is a huge slap in the face to the French government. They were braced for it, but it is a painful slap no less. President Sarkozy stopped short of promising that he would preserve France's AAA status, but he made no secret of the fact that that was his #1 priority. And tonight, demonstrably, he has failed. There will be no knee-jerk reaction, we're told, no immediate package of cuts or austerity measures, but interest rates will go up, and in a country where growth is almost stagnant, that is extremely bad news. But the real problem for President Sarkozy comes domestically, politically. France has a general election in 100 days from now. He is already struggling at the polls, and his campaign was to be based around the claim that his is the safest pair of hands to steer the economy here through this financial crisis. You can imagine his political rivals have been making huge capital out of this today. It is bad news, this, a blow to French national pride, and nobody will be feeling that harder than the president himself.
Martin, thank you.
All right, so Richard, as Martin said, this is a very great blow to President Sarkozy. It's very bad for France in some senses, but should we be more concerned about the collapse in talks over Greece's debt?
This is the other worrying development today, and the Greeks are warning of catastrophe. These are the talks about renegotiating Greece's debt that is held by banks, and the talks between them, we understand, have broken down. The banks had already agreed to write off 50% of Greece's national debt, so they think that they've already taken quite a hit. But the Greek government is insisting that they also only have to pay a lower interest rate as well, and the banks are having none of that. So it's critical they do come to an agreement at some stage, and quite soon, because the Greek government needs cash in order to function. We're perilously close to a Greek default, and that's the catastrophe that's been mentioned.
All right, so what does this mean for our government then?
Well, initially, Britain could benefit because investors in Eurozone bonds may have second thoughts, withdraw their money and put it into safe havens. And we're seen as a safe haven, even though we have an economy that's not in the greatest of shapes, the public debt and budget deficits and so on. But the effect of us being seen as a safe haven is that it would make the borrowing for British government cheaper, but long-term, turmoil in the Eurozone will have a detrimental effect on the British economy because we are so intricately tied up with the rest of Europe.
All right, Richard, thank you very much indeed. And as Richard said, the rating downgrades in the Eurozone didn't have a huge impact on markets today. The FTSE here finished just under 0.5% lower. In Frankfurt, the DAX closed down by just under 0.6%, and the Dow in New York dropped by 1/3%.
The government's plan to scrap child benefit for high-earning parents was described as an utter shambles by Labour tonight. It followed an admission from David Cameron that for some the changes would be unfair, prompting the Chancellor, George Osborne, to say they were still working on the detail. Our political correspondent Libby Vina reports.
15 months ago, it seemed like the dream photocall for any Prime Minister, announcing his new child benefit policy with his new baby daughter in his arms. But while Florence grew up fast, the policy didn't. There were awkward headlines and awkward anomalies, which David Cameron now says he wants addressed. The trickiest is the so-called cliff edge, at which the entire benefit is lost. If just one parent works, earning more than £43,000, they lose it. But if both parents work, they could make £85,000 and still keep all the benefit. So is a U-turn imminent? Not necessarily, but the Chancellor is looking at the details.
It is fair that those who are better off in our society make a contribution to the saving of money we need to make to pay down the debt. So we will be removing child benefit from higher rate taxpayers. We haven't set out how we're going to implement that, and we're going to do that in the next few months.
It's a complete and total shambles, and it's about time that they scrapped this particular proposal and went back to the drawing board.
Criticism from Labour isn't surprising, but what about mothers?
I think it's always been the same for everybody, and that's fair, and that's how it should stay.
No, I don't think it's at all fair either. I think it's it's the people further up the line, of course, who caused the whole problem in the first place, who should have their salaries cut.
And if that's worrying the Prime Minister, he's right to be worried.
Our polling is showing that he does have an issue among female voters, particularly on trust, and if he is going to look at reforms to child benefit and reforms to the welfare system, he's really going to need to sort of offer women an olive branch, because they tend to be more fretful on these issues anyway.
But the big question is, can child benefit be reformed in a way that is both simple and fair? Tax experts doubt it, and the Prime Minister seems to have set the Chancellor a task that is almost impossible to resolve. Libby Vina, ITV News, Westminster.
Alex Salmond said today he is prepared to meet David Cameron in Edinburgh, in London or wherever in order to discuss the next steps towards a referendum on Scotland's independence.
The Scottish First Minister made the offer following a meeting with Mr Clegg in Dublin, where they are attending the British-Irish summit.
The son of the woman killed in a 95-mile-an-hour train crash in Cumbria 5 years ago today welcomed the news that Network Rail is to face prosecution. Pensioner Margaret Masson died when the Euston to Glasgow Express came off the tracks at Greyrig. Faulty points were blamed. Her son George said the rail operator had put money ahead of safety. Emma Murphy reports from Cumbria.
Travelling at 92 miles an hour, the 515 from Euston to Glasgow was catapulted from the track just outside the Cumbrian village of Greyrig.